Theirs was a story of second chances.
They had gone to high school together, and they circled back later and established a relationship.
He was just really, really friendly and sweet.
She was just a beautiful person, inside out.
They went from friends to lovers.
But their flame was extinguished the moment one of them disappeared in the city of brotherly love.
There were prayer vigils and rallies being held throughout the city.
I'm not gonna let it go until I can find out where my daughter's at.
Nobody knew who would have wanted to harm her, and that's what made it such a mystery.
As days turned into weeks, loved ones began to fear the worst, while investigators uncovered one dark secret after the next.
My reaction to both pregnancies was like, man, how did you get yourself into this situation?
They begin to suspect that this is a homicide.
But to stop this roller coaster ride of emotions, detectives would have to spring a trap, one seemingly fit for a blockbuster spy movie.
It was something out of a Hollywood film. I mean, it was that exciting and that dramatic. The lights come on, the sirens come on, and you talk about somebody being caught red-handed.
Monday, July 18, 2005, West Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's 6 p.m., and workers at a local daycare are waiting on one last parent, pregnant 24-year-old LaToya Figueroa, to pick up her daughter, Aisha.
Hi, LaToya. It's Shelly from Aisha's daycare. I was just calling to make sure that you're still going to come pick her up today.
She didn't pick up her daughter that night for daycare. Even at 6 months pregnant, just leaving her. No way. There's no way. It's not even in her physical being to be like that.
Hi, is this Antoine Jenkins?
She took pride in being a mom.
Aisha's not been picked up yet today, and I can't get in touch with her mother. Do you think there's any way that you'd be able to come pick her up?
If she couldn't pick her daughter up, she would have made arrangements for someone else to pick her up.
Fortunately, her father was an emergency contact, so they contacted the father, and he picked his daughter up. He was really concerned.
Toya, why didn't you show up? Aisha can spend the night with me, but give me a call when you can.
Hours later, Antoine still hasn't heard from LaToya. She's also a no-show at the apartment she shares with her uncle.
It's so not in her character. It's so not LaToya. Instantly, you're like, something's wrong. Something happened.
LaToya's family tries desperately to reach her, but their calls go unanswered. So they start reaching out to her closest friends, including LaToya's current boyfriend, Stephen Poche.
Hello? She was 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he was the father.
I was calling to see if you'd heard from LaToya over the last few days.
I seen her yesterday. We went to a doctor's appointment. What's up?
She didn't come home, and she didn't pick up Aisha from daycare yesterday, and that's just not like her.
What? Tell me what's going on.
Stephen was extremely concerned about not only her welfare and well-being, but the well-being of this unborn child.
Despite their best efforts to find LaToya, another day passes with no sign of her. On July 21st, her family files a missing persons report with the Philadelphia Police Department.
LaToya's family let the authorities know right away, this is unlike LaToya. So they really believe that something's wrong.
People were thinking, what could have happened to LaToya? Was she in a hospital somewhere and no one could identify her? Did someone snatch her? And was she still alive? It's a huge mystery.
A mystery that was about to become a rallying cry for a city. One rippling with unspeakable deceit and tangled lies that all culminates in a heart-stopping showdown. Born and raised in West Philadelphia, LaToya Figueroa was a little girl with a big heart.
LaToya would give her shirt off her back for the next person to help them out. Would truly look out for a person without even knowing them.
She was a hard worker. She had a dream of being a nurse.
She put herself on a path to succeed, and she was determined that she wasn't going to let anything stop her.
By the time LaToya reached high school, she had blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman.
She's like 4'11", maybe 115 pounds, soaking wet. Just little and petite. A beautiful person, inside, out.
When she was just 16, LaToya fell head over heels for a classmate at West Philly High, Antoine Jenkins.
Antoine and Toya, when they first got together, they were very young. They loved each other. They really, really did.
A year later, LaToya became pregnant. Thrilled to become a mother, she and Antoine named their baby girl Aisha.
She was very responsible, very good caretaker, very interested in loving and nurturing her daughter, an involved parent.
She loved being a mom, and she was a great mom.
The love for their child wasn't enough to keep LaToya and Antoine together as a couple. After graduating high school in 1999, the two parted ways.
I believe it was a good relationship. I think that they both were just too young.
But raising a daughter on her own meant LaToya had to make sacrifices, and that meant putting her dreams of nursing school on hold.
She had 3 jobs, and one was a hostess. She worked at a marketing research firm. I mean, so driven, so determined to make sure that her daughter wanted for nothing.
As much as LaToya adored her daughter, at 23, the young woman with a shining smile and killer figure still craved something else.
She wanted to love again. She wanted to share her life with somebody.
As fate would have it, one day in late 2004, she unexpectedly bumped into an old friend.
Toya?
Steven?
Steven had worked at a local oil company, but he had known LaToya since high school.
He was just really, really friendly and sweet.
Look at you. You look good.
You look good yourself, though.
You think?
Trust me, I know.
Toya was pretty, so I think he was attracted to her. Now, her being attracted to him, I can honestly say he's one of the few good guys.
So you should definitely hit me up.
I'd love that. What's your number?
They started off as friends, very good friends. They were both funny, goofy, laid-back type of people.
It wasn't long before the pair's friendship blossomed into something more.
Somewhere along the line, it became an intimate situation, whereas though they went from friends to lovers.
This is good. Like, I love it. Really good.
He was sweet and romantic. He's the type of guy that holds the car door open, buys the flowers, stuff like that.
For LaToya, being with Steven was just easy. Steven was great with Aisha, and that meant the world to LaToya.
A fact that soon became even more important after LaToya broke some news to Steven.
I'm pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
That February, a few months later, after they reconnected, LaToya found out that she was pregnant.
She was ecstatic. She was totally overjoyed.
Steven was a little shocked when he found out that Toya was pregnant, but he was happy about it. He named the baby and everything.
With Steven's love and support, LaToya's future had never seemed more promising.
She had a beautiful daughter, another child on the way, and a man in her life who loved her. Life was good, and it seemed like it was only going to get better.
But on July 18th, 2005, the life Steven and LaToya were building together comes crashing down. That day, LaToya Figueroa disappears without a trace.
She's literally vanished.
Someone who typically stays connected to their family to go missing and just vanish, that's a huge red flag that something has gone wrong.
In July of 2005, LaToya Figueroa's life seemed blessed in so many ways. Already the proud mother of a 7-year-old daughter, LaToya was now 5 months pregnant with a second child, all thanks to a rekindled relationship with high school friend turned lover, Steven Poche.
They were friends first, and when they became lovers, I was just like, who really doesn't want to fall in love with a friend?
But on Monday, July 18th, after a routine prenatal visit, LaToya failed to pick up her daughter at daycare, triggering alarm bells for her family and friends.
They were hoping for the best, but also thinking of the worst, trying to put whatever clues they had together, piece together some type of story or scenario for what could have happened.
Now, 48 hours after LaToya's disappearance, her friends and family are doing everything they can to find her.
They were placing pamphlets and brochures and pictures of her all around the city of Philadelphia.
Meanwhile, Philadelphia police are ramping up their search efforts as well. They've started by looking at one of the people closest to LaToya.
When you have a case like LaToya's, it was a natural instinct for the police officers to turn to Stephen Poche because he was the last person that was known to be with her.
When was the last time you saw LaToya?
The last time I saw LaToya was July 18th. Yeah, she had a prenatal appointment that morning, and she wanted me to go with her.
Stephen Poche says that they went to a doctor's appointment, they went to get something to eat, they went to his apartment, she left, and he didn't see her again after that.
How was she feeling? Was everything okay?
Everything was fine. I mean, she wanted to go shopping for the baby, so I mean, I went to the bank and got out $300.
What time did she leave the house here?
5 o'clock. She had to go pick up Aisha from daycare, yeah.
Emotionally, Stephen was a wreck for multiple reasons because, one, she was pregnant with his child. No one knew where she was at.
Stephen appears genuinely concerned, and when detectives follow up on his story, it checks out.
Stephen's bank records show a withdrawal from that afternoon for around $300. And a neighbor claimed that they saw LaToya walking around 5 p.m. near Stephen's apartment.
Stephen agreed to let the police department search his home. There was no DNA, no hair, no blood, nothing to indicate that any foul play had happened at the house.
But before detectives leave, Stephen drops a bombshell. One that suggests his relationship with LaToya wasn't as seamless as it appeared.
He brings in the possibility of her having other relationships with other men.
He mentions that there's a person that's giving her flowers. He mentions that there's a person that works at the Friday's restaurant. Then he also mentions the fact that she has this previous boyfriend who she has a child with.
Could one of these men be involved in LaToya's disappearance? Stephen isn't sure, but he claims LaToya might well have had beef with her ex, daughter Aisha's father, Antoine Jenkins.
He mentioned to police that Antoine was spending more time with his new wife and her kids versus spending time with, her daughter, and LaToya had a real problem with that.
Just for some of the things Toya said herself, like she would have these fiery arguments with the father of her kid, and it was a time where he did struck her.
If the allegations are true, detectives know they need to find Antoine immediately.
It doesn't take them long to find Antoine because he was with LaToya's family, putting up flyers, talking to neighbors, seemingly doing everything in his power to help try to find her.
My partner and I are investigating LaToya's disappearance, and we'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind.
Investigators begin by asking Antoine about his relationship with LaToya.
We know y'all have had some problems in the past, and that they might have been about your daughter. Is that true?
Yes. LaToya, she's an amazing mom. She always wanted what was best for our daughter. Sure, we had the occasional fights, but it was never serious.
Because of his sincerity, the police officers kind of ruled him out. He seems to be sincerely concerned about her welfare.
After hitting another dead end, frustrated detectives are finding few leads.
Police officers weren't able to find any activity in her bank accounts, any calls being made from her cell phone, or anything of that nature.
However, LaToya's family refuses to give up hope.
Her father, Melvin Figueroa, a trooper. I mean, this gentleman would not let the story die. He began to pester the media. He pestered the police. He pestered everybody until the story was told.
I got to stick by my daughter's side. I can't turn my back on her.
To help drum up publicity, Melvin Figueroa calls in the help of a prominent local relative, his cousin, Philadelphia City Councilman Juan Ramos.
The city, particularly our police department, is doing everything that they can.
Ramos sets up a hotline, establishes a reward, and helps turn the search for LaToya into a citywide campaign.
The only thing we can do when someone is lost is go look for them, and that's all we're doing at this time in Christ.
It's supposed to be the city of brotherly love. You know, if it's love out there, just please share it with us. That's all I have to say right now.
The publicity pays off, and the city bonds with one common goal: to find LaToya Figueroa.
Everyone's on board, the family's searching, the city gives supports. Everyone is doing everything they can to help find LaToya.
Dozens more leads pour in, but unfortunately, none yield any credible evidence as to LaToya's whereabouts. Then on August 16th, a police team makes a shocking discovery in the Brewery Town section of Philadelphia, 5 miles away from where LaToya was last sighted.
They found a badly decomposed body of an African-American woman.
You're still hoping for the best, but in your inside, you're like, there's just no way. Your hopes is starting to be overshadowed by the doubts and, you know, your fears. She may not be coming back.
It's been nearly a month since 24-year-old single mother LaToya Figueroa vanished from the streets of Philadelphia. 5 months pregnant with her second child, LaToya's plight has gripped the community and left her loved ones devastated.
Very disturbing, very like a limbo type feeling. You really don't know how to feel. You know, you're still hoping for the best.
On August 16th, police find a badly decomposed female corpse 5 miles from the West Philly street where LaToya was last spotted, causing the hopes of the community to plummet.
Everyone was terrified this could be LaToya. As soon as the family heard about the discovery, they rushed to the scene.
After securing the crime scene perimeter, investigators take a look at their victim.
All right, how long do you think it'll take to get an autopsy going?
About 24 to 48 hours.
24, 48 hours.
When the official report reaches investigators, the findings are conclusive.
It was not LaToya because of the physical characteristics of this woman.
Their Jane Doe had short hair, whereas LaToya's hair was long. And most importantly, the victim was obviously not 5 months pregnant.
Although LaToya's friends and family breathe a sigh of relief when they hear the news, the fact remains. Police are still no closer to finding LaToya.
There's also some frustration in this case because there are really not a lot of physical clues. She just vanished.
She didn't seem to have any enemies, and there was no reason anyone would want to hurt her.
That is, until detectives come across a police report filed on April 28, 2005, 3 months prior to her disappearance.
LaToya Figueroa is coming home from work, and a woman approaches her from behind, throws her to the ground, kicks her in the stomach, takes her pocketbook, and then jumps in a car with a black male, and they drive away.
According to the incident report, LaToya was over 2 months pregnant at the time.
She was rushed to the ER, and thank goodness her and the baby were okay.
At the time, it was thought to be an unrelated robbery attempt, but in retrospect, police started to wonder if this woman could have possibly been connected somehow to Miss Figueroa's disappearance.
While detectives try to ascertain the identity of LaToya's two assailants, authorities in Philadelphia are beginning to suspect the worst.
LaToya still isn't found, and so at that point, the worst is assumed. She was responsible, she was dependable, didn't seem like the type of individual that would just take off and not notify her family or friends of her whereabouts, particularly when her child would be left alone without provision.
The police begin to suspect that this is a homicide, and they begin to investigate it as that. The only problem is they don't have a body.
But handing the case over to the homicide unit could be the kickstarter this investigation needs.
You know, if you classify it as a homicide investigation, you get the best investigators, the best detective team, presumably, you know, all working on this case.
For the new team of investigators, that means leaving no stone unturned. However, before detectives wade too deep into the murky waters of LaToya's case, they receive a startling call from her cousin, Curtisha Davis.
Detective Jones.
The subject matter, Stephen Poche.
The police receive a tip that there's another woman that Stephen Poche was dealing with.
She was like a high school sweetheart of his. Yeah, he was head over heels for her.
But that's not all.
She was pregnant at the same time as Miss Figueroa.
According to Kertisha, the other woman's name is Lena Thompson.
They were always friends. It'd be an off and on thing with them. With him and Lena, it was like they just stopped for a few, took this long break. And then it was like, oh, well, I'm talking back to her.
Kertisha says that even before Lena or LaToya became pregnant, there was no love lost between the two women.
Lena, you need to leave. I've been telling you about talking to her. Lena, you need to leave.
What are you doing here?
Lena, you need to leave. I told you about talking to her. I told you this was my man. We've talked about this.
Get out of here.
You get out of here. Get your car and keep going.
Anybody that knew him knew who Lena was. They did not like each other. They had words, and it wasn't good words.
How many times I have to tell you, Stephen? I don't want you dealing with her. I don't want you dealing with her.
Stephen, though, apparently navigated between the two women with the smooth composure of a diplomat.
He did not like that confrontational stuff. He didn't want it to be them bumping heads. So that's pretty much what it was about. Just like, look, let's squash it.
That plan worked until Lena and LaToya each came to Stephen with their own surprise announcements.
Stephen was shocked when he found out that both girls were pregnant.
Detectives pressed Kertisha for more details on this shocking new lead.
It wasn't like he was trying to get both girls pregnant at the same time. And I know that sounds crazy because it's like, use a condom. However, he loved both girls. He just didn't want to like hurt them.
So here he is trying to juggle these two pregnancies, and everybody's like, wow, this really changes the focus of the case.
Namely, it means police have a potential new suspect in LaToya's disappearance.
The fact he had this other woman pregnant, is she upset that Stephen has two people pregnant at the same time? Could she be a possible doer in this crime?
Not to mention how this revelation paints the man at the center of this torrid love triangle in an entirely different light.
That raises red flags. You also have another girl pregnant. That's not good. That's going to make any detective suspicious.
But before investigators sit down with Stephen Poche a second time, they first want to talk to the other woman vying for his affections. And what she's about to say would quash any doubts as to who was the victor in this jilted game of hearts.
The situation was a ticking time bomb. It was about to explode, and someone was going to get hurt in the fallout.
As the search for missing 24-year-old mother, LaToya Figueroa, reaches the end of its first month, detectives have discovered that the father of LaToya's unborn child, Stephen Poche, is involved in not one, but two steamy relationships.
He is stuck between a relationship with two women he has pregnant at the same time.
Stephen responded to them both being pregnant like any guy would, like, oh, what did I just do?
Naturally, investigators are curious if this development had any bearing on LaToya's disappearance. So they sit down with Stephen's other love interest, Lena Thompson.
Listen, we know that Stephen Poche is the father of your child and LaToya's. That must have made you upset.
I just wanted Stephen to be happy.
Did you have anything to do with her disappearance?
No.
What did you do when you found that LaToya was pregnant with his child too?
Stephen didn't even want that baby. He wanted LaToya to have an abortion.
There's this phone conversation that happens between LaToya, the girlfriend, and Stephen, where the girlfriend and Stephen are asking LaToya to get an abortion. And she says no, that is not something that she would be willing to do. And so for Stephen, I could imagine that he was feeling like he was losing control.
Police know that when a situation like this one spirals out of control, bad things can happen. Detectives can't help but wonder if LaToya's street robbery 4 months earlier wasn't as random as it first appeared.
There were rumors that there was a guy who had some females attack LaToya, made it look like a robbery, and that this was going to be a kind of on-street abortion by beating her in the stomach to the point where she miscarries.
Now, you and Stephen wouldn't have had anything to do with that attack, would you? Seems like a pretty good way to get rid of a baby, huh?
That's crazy. Like, I had nothing to do with that. I swear.
The rumors of the attack were just that, rumors. Nothing the police found directly tied Lena or Stephen directly to the attack. Lena's alibi on the day of LaToya's disappearance checked out, so they had to let her go.
But investigators still have a few questions for Stephen, so they sit down with him for a second time.
Why didn't you tell us about Lena's pregnancy?
Because it had nothing to do with this.
Really? Asking LaToya to have an abortion had nothing to do with her or her disappearance?
I didn't ask her to have an abortion. Who said that? She disappears all the time. She does this thing all the time.
This is what she did when she got mad. She shut everybody out, and I don't know if she would like leave town or whatever the situation may be, but she was shut down and she was just like not want to be bothered with anybody.
However, those who know LaToya best say that she would never do anything of the kind.
I never thought that LaToya had taken off. Her whole life was her daughter. So to believe that she would just leave her like that, never.
There's something about his mannerisms, his gestures, the story he's telling. The police officers are suspicious.
And detectives aren't the only ones who have become suspicious about Stephen's story in the month following LaToya's disappearance.
We just feel as though he knows something because he was the last person to see her.
LaToya's family really believed he had something to do with her disappearance. They just couldn't prove it.
Through it all, Stephen continues to proclaim his innocence.
I didn't murder anybody. Why are you not listening to me?
Emotionally, Stephen was a wreck. He was like, yo, why are her family members and stuff blaming me? Not only was he being blamed, but he was being targeted.
But without any physical evidence linking Poche to LaToya's disappearance, there's nothing anyone can do.
Okay, so do you have anything on me? Because if you don't have anything on me, I'm ready to go.
They interrogated him for hours on end. He was able to be let go because they had no proof he was showing any foul play in the whole ordeal.
If you don't have the body, you can't have a murder.
That is until an unlikely witness steps forward with a chilling story. A story that may just finally reveal what happened to LaToya Figueroa.
An informant contacts the Philadelphia Police Department and tells him that a man calls him, wants him to get a van, a shovel, and of all things, a body bag.
Four weeks after LaToya Figueroa mysteriously disappeared, the Philadelphia Police Department receives a shocking call that will change the course of this investigation.
The Philadelphia Police Department receives a tip from a concerned citizen that an individual that he knew had contacted him about getting his hands on a body bag.
Why else would somebody want a body bag if they weren't intending to put a body in it?
According to the tipster, William Mason, he believes the body could be that of LaToya.
Obviously, that got the attention of the detectives right away, and so too did the identity of Mason's friend. It was Stephen Poche.
Stephen Poche had contacted him about getting his hands on a truck, a body bag, shovels, and was interested in hiding or burying a body.
However, investigators are initially suspicious. For starters, William Mason has a criminal record.
Not only did Mason have a record, but police had already searched Poche's home, and there was no evidence to indicate that a crime had taken place there.
Even while they're feeling skeptical about the tip, there's a sense of desperation because at this point, LaToya's been missing for a month. They were running out of any other credible leads.
But there's still one thing missing from William Mason's story: a body. So investigators hatch a plan of their own.
They have the informant contact Stephen Poche to let him know that he got the items that he wanted them to get.
The cops say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you a van, we'll give you some stuff, and we'll send you down there with him.
The police were going to set a trap. They're going to follow this informant, and they're going to trap them.
On the night of August 19th, 2005, Mason arranges to meet Stephen at a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania, 15 miles southwest of Philadelphia.
Hey, man, what took so long?
Chester is like a rural area outside of Philadelphia. If you're going to hide a body or dump a body, you'd be more inclined to do it in Chester County, thinking that no one would ever find it. He's in his vehicle. The friend who's supposed to help him move the body is in that separate vehicle. But little does Stephen know that friend has some type of GPS connection to the police. So they're following Stephen and the friend.
The police follow them down to Chester. They see Stephen Poche go into this field on 4th Street, go through a hole in the fence.
Man, this place creeps me out. What you doing, man? Hand me a soap. Hand me a...
But as Stephen starts to dig, law enforcement's surveillance team notes something troubling.
Stephen had 2 .45s and a bulletproof vest on.
They find that he's armed, and they find that he is apparently ready to do harm to someone, and perhaps even the person who helped him to move that body.
Fearful that William Mason could be the next victim, officers move in.
As Stephen is about to take the body out, the lights come on, the sirens come on, and you talk about somebody being caught red-handed.
Suspect has fled the scene. All officers be advised. Suspect is armed and dangerous.
Philly police apprehended Stephen at the scene and took him into custody without a shot being fired.
With Stephen Poche now safely in custody, a team of officers searches the surrounding area and soon finds what's left of LaToya's remains.
When they found her body, it was badly decomposed, but then she has these tattoos on her back, and they're able to identify her. And then they find these fetal bones with the body, just heartbreaking.
She had been in a trash bag for 30 days in 100+ degree weather, and she had went from 130 pounds to 30 pounds when they found her. Very devastating.
The Delaware County coroner examines the body, and they find that the cause of death is asphyxiation.
For friends and family, it's a devastating turn of events. But after over a month of anguish, any answer is better than the agony of the unknown.
Probably one of the hardest things that a police officer has to do is to tell a loved one that they have discovered, found that the person that they've been looking for all this time is in fact dead.
It was relief. It was relief as far as you don't want to be in that limbo area anymore. I'm not wondering if it's this way or if it's that way.
But if Stephen Poche hadn't panicked and led police to the body, there's a good chance he may have never been caught.
There was no evidence in his home that there was a struggle or if that she was there. He cleaned up behind himself pretty well.
Nevertheless, Stephen did make the mistake of trying to move LaToya's body. And when he's taken into custody, he makes a shocking confession.
It was all an accident. I didn't mean to kill her.
Stephen is arrested and gives a statement to the detectives that he killed her, that it was an accident in response to a fight that they were having.
Stephen puts this all on LaToya. He claims that during an argument over the other girlfriend and the fact that she's pregnant, that LaToya gets agitated and attacks him. And he trying to restrain her.
Poche says she's hitting him, and he grabs her by the neck in order to get her to stop hitting him, that he just held on too long, and that once she stopped him moving after that, he just panicked.
Oh my gosh, baby. Baby, are you okay? Babe, wake up, please.
Regardless of Stephen's story, that evening, detectives charge him with LaToya's murder and the death of their unborn child, a charge that potentially carries the death penalty in the state of Pennsylvania.
I don't really believe in hate per se, but hate would definitely be a close word to explaining how I felt. To dip him in boiling hot water, that would be too easy for him.
But would the city of brotherly love feel the same way after they hear Stephen's story play out in the courtroom? It's a question everyone's about to find out.
We have a situation where Stephen Poche didn't shoot LaToya Figueroa, didn't stab her, choked her to death, but that's manslaughter, not murder.
On August 26, 2005, the body of 24-year-old expectant mother LaToya Figueroa is finally laid to rest. Those who file in to mourn the loss are still trying to cope with the shocking reality that LaToya died at the hands of her unborn child's father, Stephen Poche.
This was a heinous crime. Stephen Poche was charged with killing LaToya and their unborn child.
They literally court him in the process of moving her body. And just the evilness that's with him, anger, could not even express or explain how I felt at that moment.
The community response was, of course, outrage.
Charged with first-degree murder, Stephen faces the death penalty if convicted. His defense team fears the community's animosity can make getting a fair shake next to impossible. So in the final hours before the trial, they make a bold move.
This was a death penalty case. So we know that we had to work out any deal we could have to avoid him being executed. And that's why at the very last minute, the 11th hour, the Commonwealth agreed that if he requested a judge trial instead of a jury trial, they would take death off the table and he'd be facing life in prison.
As far as prosecutors are concerned, that's as much leniency as Stephen Poche deserves. In opening arguments, they assert LaToya's death was the result of Stephen's selfish and senseless actions.
He had another girl pregnant, was moving in with her. He didn't care about LaToya and his other child. And all he could see is trying to figure out how to get rid of this so that he can think he could be happy with this other girl and his other baby.
He told her, you have to abort this because otherwise they're going to destroy everything I'm trying to do. She refused to do that.
For the prosecution, Stephen had a clear motive. The easiest way out of this predicament was to get rid of LaToya once and for all.
LaToya Figueroa was beginning to be a strain on his other relationship. And so I think when he looked at the possibility of this child coming along, it was a commitment he was not willing to take.
It's the state's contention that following LaToya's prenatal appointment on July 18th, both she and Stephen returned to his apartment where he began his premeditated attack.
You have to see this, I do!
Following the murder, he cleaned up the scene. He wrapped LaToya's body in plastic bags and dumped her in a vacant lot in Chester, Pennsylvania. And he did everything he could to make it look like he had nothing to do with the crime.
And it's about a month later, when the heat really gets turned up on Poche, that prosecutors believe that he had concocted a plan to kill William Mason and frame him for the crime.
It was just a sick and unbelievable story all the way around.
The prosecutor's office was really focused on the fact that Mr. Poche had two young ladies pregnant at the same time, and he was the last person with her. They had this tip from William, and of course, the icing on the cake was a confession or the statement from Stephen.
But it's Stephen's very statement to police that's the crux of his defense team's case.
We don't want to hide his confession. We want to show his confession front and center because it proves exactly what we've been saying from day one. This was voluntary manslaughter, sudden and intense passion, and his confession shows that.
First-degree murder carries a much higher penalty than a manslaughter type of killing, where it's really a killing of circumstance.
Clearly, it wasn't premeditated. Clearly, it wasn't intentional. He freaked out, he choked her, and pressed too hard.
It's an assertion that many courtroom observers find hard to believe.
A person is going to be reacting, right? They're going to be flailing. Their face is going to probably be changing color. It's hard to accidentally choke somebody to death.
Was LaToya's death an accident or murder? Unlike most trials, the answer to that question is solely up to the presiding judge to decide. On October 17, 2006, after 7 days of testimony, he hands down his verdict.
The judge found Stephen guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for LaToya Figueroa and 1 for her unborn child.
At the end of this, satisfaction was felt by the entire Philadelphia community.
The outcome of the case basically gives closure to the family, to the city, to those who were concerned about this missing young woman. The city can move on, the family can move on and begin healing.
Stephen Poche is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for LaToya's devastated friends and family, the sentencing is no substitute for their loss or the grief they still feel because of one man's self-serving actions.
For a person to be so selfish and so senseless, to rob us of her, rob us of her beauty, of her presence. At the end of the day, God is the judge, and he's judging him. He's going to judge him. He's got to answer for what he's done.
This case involving Stephen Poche and LaToya Figueroa, a tragedy all around. Stephen Poche is still alive. His family can come to see him anytime they want in jail. But LaToya Figueroa, the family, the best thing that they can do is to go to the cemetery. So although it's a tragedy all around, it's by leaps and bounds much more of a tragedy for the family of LaToya Figueroa.
Not because he wanted to help, but because he wanted to see the fear in the eyes of those he was hunting. He fed on the chaos. Think about the audacity of a man who makes a phone call to a grieving family and speaks with such chilling detachment. He was playing a game of cat and mouse, testing the authorities, laughing behind his palm. The FBI profilers at the time, they were in the infancy of their craft, yet they saw through facade. They saw a man who was white, in his 20s, likely a loner with military experience, physically fit, and above all, a man who kept souvenirs. They knew he would call again on a significant date, the 1-year anniversary of his crime, because to him, that abduction was not a tragedy. It was a centerpiece, a performance piece of his own twisted vanity. The tragedy of Sandy Dickman, a young woman just trying to live her life, only deepens a stain on Meyerhofer's soul. When they found the remains, the bones, the teeth, the ash, they were looking at the residue of a man who treated life like garbage. The fact that he lived right next to the scene of his crimes, that he walked among the very people he terrorized, is the classic arrogance of a psychopath who believes he is smarter than the world. He passed polygraphs. He fooled investigators with his charm. But he could not outrun the weight of his own disgusting habits. The receipts, the blood-stained sheets, the list of campsites. They were the signatures of a man who believed he was untouchable. He kept a checklist of children, for heaven's sake. That is not just a crime. That is a sickness of the highest order. When he finally confessed, he did it on his terms, trying to bargain for his own skin. But the truth is, he was a coward who took his own life before he could ever truly answer for what he had done. He was a man who killed a young boy, Bernie Pullman, a murder he committed when he was still a boy himself, and he never gave a reason. Why would he? People like him do not have reasons. They have compulsions. They have voids where their empathy should be. They look at a child and they see an object, a toy to be discarded. It is a haunting reflection on the nature of evil. You have a mother, Marietta, who through some miracle of the human spirit manages to reach a point of forgiveness. That is not for him, that is for her, to survive the wreckage of a life he tried to destroy. I tell you, humanity has a way of surprising you. Even when you are staring directly into the face of a monster who represents the very worst of what we are capable of becoming. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for the most trivial of reasons. Reasons that would make any rational person look at them and ask, is this real life? You see, the darkness in a person does not always arrive with a storm. Sometimes it creeps in like a silent shadow, festering in the quiet corners of a home, waiting for that one moment when the weight of a lifetime finally crushes the spirit. I have spent a lifetime looking into the abyss, and I tell you, when you peel back the layers of a life destroyed by obsession or the crushing burden of caretaking, you do not just find a killer. You find a tragedy that was years in the making. Let us speak of the first case, Shirley Pierce. She was a woman who radiated sunlight, a Southern belle with a heart as big as the region she called home. She had her life, her daughter, her grandson, and a man named Chuck Reeves who promised her a future. It was supposed to be a golden chapter. But then there's the other side of that coin, the side occupied by Marlene Johnson. Marlene was a woman who defined herself by her possessiveness and an ego that could not tolerate a world where she was not the center of gravity. She lived in a warped reality where she convinced herself that surely a woman who simply existed and performed her duties was the architect of a grand affair with her husband. My, the arrogance of the jealous mind is truly a spectacle to behold. Marlene did not just watch Shirley. She studied her, she stalked her, she hired people to track her, all while her own mind fractured into a million jagged pieces of delusion. When she finally acted, it was not the work of a rational mind. It was an explosion of pure, unadulterated rage. She did not just take a life. She attempted to erase the evidence, using bleach like a pathetic painter trying to white out a masterpiece of carnage. But the truth has a funny way of leaving footprints, and in this case, those footprints were etched in the very DNA she tried to scrub away. She thought she was untouchable, standing there in the courtroom, demure and professional. But a jury saw exactly what I saw. A coward, a woman who sacrificed her own humanity on the altar of her own twisted jealousy. It is absolutely unbelievable. Then there's a second tale, one that settles deep in the marrow of your bones. Barbara and Debbie Burns. This was not a story of jealousy, but one of suffocating, relentless duty. Barbara was a woman who gave up her entire youth, her autonomy, her very self, to care for a sister who was trapped in the mind of a child. For 40 years, she was a nurse, a mother, and a protector, all while the sister she loved treated her with the kind of thoughtless cruelty that only a dependent can inflict. And then the money, that cursed inheritance that was supposed to be their salvation, became the final nail in their shared coffin. When the money vanished, the reality of their existence, the poverty, the codependency, the endless, grinding cycle of demand and resentment, clashed with such violence that Barbara simply broke. She did not have a plan. She did not have a motive that made any sense in the light of day. She had a breaking point. When she pulled that trigger, she was not just ending her sister's life. She was trying to end her own prison, living in a trailer with the remains of your own blood for weeks, surrounding yourself with air fresheners as if you could mask the scent of your own ruined soul. That is not something you walk away from. You have to be kidding me. She confessed, she served her time, and she walked out into a world that no longer recognized her. These cases tell us that the thin line between a good person and a monster is often drawn by the circumstances we are forced to endure. We look for monsters under the bed, but often the real monsters are just people who have been pushed until there is nothing left but the urge to snap. It is a sobering reminder that we are all just one bad day, one crushing responsibility, or one jealous thought away from a life we can never take back. I tell you, it is enough to make you shake your head at the fragility of it all. People think they know what they are capable of until they are standing at the edge of that abyss. And let me tell you, it is a very long way down. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most pathetic, senseless reasons you can imagine. They trade a lifetime of potential, a heart that beats and dreams, for a moment of cold, calculated darkness. You look at a case like this, and you have to ask yourself, what happens to a person that makes them believe their own petty grievances are worth the price of a soul? I have seen it all in my time, but some things, they just stick to your ribs. My, you have to be kidding me. Let us walk through the desert heat of Arizona, back to 1988. Pamela Pitts was 19 years old, a young woman with a smile that could light up a room and a spirit that was just beginning to find its wings. She had everything in front of her, but she made a mistake. She walked into the orbit of Shelley Norgard. Now, people like Shelley, they have holes in them where their conscience ought to be. I look at the life Shelley lived, and I see a trail of broken things. Abandonment issues, they call it. She felt the world was against her, that she was owed something, and when life did not provide, she decided to take it. She was like a shadow moving to the lives of others. leeching off their light until she decided to extinguish it entirely. Pamela was outgoing, artistic, and kind. She was a glue in her family. When she moved in with Shelley, she thought she was gaining a friend. She did not know she was moving in with a predator. Shelley was always telling stories, spinning webs, always looking for someone to blame for the chaos she created in her own head. When the money got tight and the friendship soured, when Pamela dared to want a life of her own, away from Shelley, that was a trigger. Shelley could not handle the rejection. She could not handle being left behind. To someone like her, a friend leaving is not just a goodbye. It is a personal affront. It is a crime. And so, on a September night, 1988, in a place locals called the Gordo Pit, the unthinkable happened. Pamela was beaten and left to burn. Think about that for a second. The brutality of it, the absolute disrespect for a human life. Whoever did this, they did not just want her dead, they wanted her erased. They wanted her identity to be ash in the wind. Investigators found what was left of her 13 days later. The medical examiner, he saw the heat-kill fly larvae in the char, and he knew what we all knew deep down. This was an act of profound, gut-wrenching hatred. For years, the case went cold. The rumor mill churned. Satanic cults. Ritualistic killings. The usual nonsense people invent when they cannot stomach the banality of pure evil. It was never a cult. It was just a jealous, broken person who thought she could get away with it because she was clever enough to lie. And for a long time, she even killed again. Ray Clerks, a young man who had the audacity to plan a future that did not include her. She shot him, stuffed him in a waterbed liner, and dropped him down a mine shaft. 2 lives, 2 futures, gone because Shelley Norgard could not stand to be alone. When they finally brought her to justice, when the evidence, that flashlight, that confession she was eventually forced to make, came to light, you saw the true face of the killer. It was not a monster from a movie. It was someone who, when cornered, could only offer a hollow, pathetic account of hitting someone until they stopped breathing. She claimed it was an accident. I tell you, there is no accident in pouring gasoline on a body. That is a choice. That is a signature of hate. Shelley walked out a free woman at age 50. Time served for the life she took in a mine shaft. Her confession for Pamela's death effectively just closing a file. It is a tragedy, but it is a reality of the system. Pamela Pitts deserved a full life. She deserved to go to beauty college, to see the world, to be the big sister she always was. Instead, she became a lesson in the fragility of life and the darkness that can dwell in the person sitting right next to you. You look at her father, Paul, and you see the weight of 30 years of not knowing. That is the real crime here, not just a murder, but the theft of peace, the theft of time. You have to be kidding me if you think justice was fully served. But at least the truth finally crawled out of the dark. And in this business, sometimes that is all you get. Human beings, they are strange, fragile creatures. They will trade their very souls for a handful of silver, or in this case, for the hollow comfort of keeping up appearances. They kill for the most pathetic, unimaginative reasons you could ever conjure up. My. I tell you, you have to be kidding me. You look at a woman like Margaret Abernathy, a pillar of her community, a grandmother, a matriarch who built an empire from the ground up, and you think to yourself, who could possibly want to snuff out that light? And then you find the answer, and it turns your stomach because it was hiding in plain sight, sitting right at the dinner table. February the 4th, 1991, LaGrange, Georgia. A picturesque place, or so they tell you. It is the kind of town where everybody knows your business before you have even finished your morning coffee. Priscilla Matula, the daughter, calls 911. She says her mother has been hurt in a burglary. She finds her on the bathroom floor, blood everywhere. Now, when I hear a story like that, my antenna goes up. We arrive, and the house is a crime scene. A back window, a broken pane, the appearance of a forced entry. It looked like a burglary, but something was off. It was too neat. The drawers were pulled out, but nothing of real value. The electronics, the televisions, they were all still there. You have to be kidding me. A thief in a hurry does not leave the goods behind to curate a display. For the police, it was a staged scene, and in my experience, when a scene is staged, you are not looking for a stranger. You are looking at someone who shared a life with the victim. Margaret Abernathy was a woman of substance. She was generous, a businesswoman who supported her children through every storm. And Priscilla, the baby of the family, was right there by her side, involved in every transaction, every club, every detail of the family car dealership. They were inseparable, or so it seemed, but money is a corrosive thing. It eats away at bonds that you think are unbreakable. Margaret had helped Priscilla and her husband, Nick, buy their own dealership, pouring $130,000 into their dreams. But dreams built on debt have a way of waking you up with a scream. The medical examiner gives us the truth that the staging tried to hide. Margaret was shot twice in the head with a small caliber weapon. One shot in the bedroom, one in the bathroom. The evidence showed that after the first shot, Margaret had actually tried to stop her own bleeding with toilet tissue. Think about that for a second. She was alive, she was suffering, and she was alone. The shooter had to come back to finish it. That is not a robbery. That is an execution. That is cold. We start pulling the threads, and the whole tapestry begins to unravel. We find out that just 2 days before her murder, Margaret had been to the bank, and she was furious. She had discovered the truth about her daughter's business practices. Priscilla had been running a check kiting scheme, robbing Peter to pay Paul, juggling $30,000 here and there to make the books look balanced when they were bleeding red. Margaret was done. She was going to cut Priscilla off, take her off the accounts, and strip her of her authority. Priscilla was going to lose everything. Her status, her business, her lifeline. When you back a desperate person into a corner, they do not always choose a high road. They choose the darkness. Priscilla, looking at the abyss of financial ruin, decided to settle the account once and for all. She lied about her whereabouts. She fabricated a story about a post office trip with long lines. But she forgot one thing: witnesses. A convenience store clerk saw her near the house that morning. A neighbor saw her vehicle in the driveway. Her alibi was a house of cards, and it collapsed the moment we breathed on it. And then, the audacity of the woman. Even while out on bond, she tries to manipulate a witness, calling and trying to adjust memories, try and make the truth go away. She was not even crying for her mother. She was crying for herself. During her interviews, she would not even acknowledge the murder. She talked around it, cold and calculating. When the jury finally heard the evidence, they saw what we saw: a daughter who valued her status more than her own mother's life. She was found guilty and sentenced to life. I have spent my life looking into the eyes of people who have done the unthinkable. I tell you, it stays with you. A daughter killing her mother over money? It is unimaginable. It forces you to look into a dark place, into the abyss of human greed. The Abernathy family died on that day, too. They lost their grandmother, their matriarch, and they lost their trust in one another, all for money that did not exist. It is a tragedy of the highest order, and it makes you realize that sometimes the ties that bind are the very things that end up being used to strangle you. My, people are just the strangest creatures. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine, and sometimes the perpetrators are the very people who spent their entire lives caring for their own victims. My, this is a tale of blind sacrifice and a bloody conclusion that no one saw coming. St. Petersburg is a beautiful city, a sleepy little town for retirees. But behind the mobile homes on Yellow Pine Drive, darkness always knows how to hide. In May of 2005, when a cleaning crew arrived to clear out a foreclosed property, they did not find the vacant home they expected. They found sheets draped over everything, bowls of potpourri, and air fresheners scattered in every corner. Do you understand the implication of that? It was a desperate attempt of someone trying to mask the stench of a body decomposing for months. When they reached the final bedroom and tried to lift the bedding, the sticky feeling of the blankets coming apart like Velcro told them this was no ordinary cleanup. A human foot poked out from a plastic bag. It was gut-wrenching. When we arrived on the scene, the stench permeated every inch of that trailer. We could not initially identify the victim, only that she had been there for a very long time. Through tax records, we confirmed the home belonged to sisters Barbara and Deborah Burns. Deborah, who had suffered neurological damage from a young age, and Barbara, the devoted sister who had spent 40 years serving as her nursemaid, her babysitter, and her sole provider. I tell you, that kind of burden is more than any human being should have to carry. After their mother passed, and they received for the veteran detectives who had poured years of their lives into the case, the outcome brought a profound sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the true measure of justice is often complex. They hoped that by bringing the truth to light, they had provided some small measure of peace to the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls whose journey to find the American dream would always be remembered by the community they loved. In the heart of Texas, where the summers stretched long and golden across the prairie, the city of Arlington grew as a patchwork of dreams. Among the many who came to weave their own threads into this vast tapestry were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had left the quiet riverways and emerald fields of Vietnam in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their hopes, their family, and an unwavering belief in the promise of a new land. To know Long was to know a man of quiet dignity. Even in his 70s, his hands remained steady, shaped by decades of honest labor. He possessed a gentle smile that could warm the coldest room, and his eyes held the wisdom of a survivor who had seen the world shift and change. Hong was his perfect counterpart. She was a woman of infinite grace, whose laughter was like the chime of wind bells on a breezy afternoon. Together, they represented the very essence of devotion, having walked hand in hand through the trials of immigration and the challenges of starting over in a foreign country. When they arrived in Texas, they did not seek an easy path. Instead, they established a commercial sewing business, a venture born from their shared skill and tireless work ethic. In the beginning, the hum of the sewing machines was a heartbeat of their household. They worked side by side, measuring fabrics, cutting patterns, and sewing garments with meticulous care. To help them navigate this new landscape, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was 38 years old, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family. He became the face of the business, interacting with contractors and managing the daily operations, while Long and Hong focused on the craftsmanship that defined their work. For nearly a decade, their dedication bore beautiful fruit. The sewing business flourished, and their household was filled with the happy noise of children and grandchildren. Their crowning achievement came when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than Disney. It was a proud moment for family, a validation of every sacrifice they had made. They felt they had truly captured their slice of the American dream. But as the years passed, the tides of fortune began to turn. By the year 2011, the sewing business encountered severe challenges. The vital contract with Disney was lost, and the steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle. The gentle hum of the machines grew quiet, replaced by the heavy silence of financial worry. Long and Hong, deeply traditional in their ways, felt the weight of this decline. They had spent their lives protecting their family, and the prospect of failure was a shadow they could not easily shake. In their search for comfort and a way to restore their family's prosperity, they turned to the ancient beliefs of their homeland. For thousands of years, their ancestors had believed in spiritual forces, in the balance of energy, and in the protection of benevolent guardians. When a family faced overwhelming obstacles, It was customary to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to lift curses and invite good fortune. Back into home, encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow Tran began searching for someone who could help them heal their business and their hearts. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, some 250 miles away. The woman, named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses and bring positive energy to those in need. Desperate for a solution, Chow contacted her and arranged a consultation at her home in Houston. It was a journey made of hope, a search for a guiding light in a season of darkness. But none of them could have foreseen that this quest for a spiritual savior would slowly lead them into a web of greed and tragedy. Chapter 2, The Gathering Shadow. The journey to Houston was filled with quiet anticipation. Chow Tran drove down the long highway, his mind occupied by the survival of the family business. Beside him, the memory of his mother-in-law's hopeful words offered comfort. When he met Daphne Wright, he found a woman of striking presence. She was 44 years old, confident, and carried herself with an authority that suggested deep knowledge of the spiritual realm. She spoke with certainty, assuring Chow that she could easily identify the source of their bad luck and dissolve it through ancient rituals. Daphne performed her ceremonies, burning incense and reciting prayers meant to realign the family's fortunes. For a brief moment, Chow felt a sense of relief. He returned to Arlington with renewed hope, sharing the details of the meeting with Long and Hong. The family wanted so desperately to believe that their troubles were temporary, that the dark cloud over their sewing shop would soon dissipate. Yet, as the months of 2011 rolled into 212, the business did not recover. Instead, the financial burden grew heavier. Rather than questioning the effectiveness of the rituals, Chow found himself drawn deeper into Daphne's influence. He believed that perhaps the curse was stronger than they had initially realized, requiring more intensive and far more expensive spiritual interventions. Daphne, recognizing the family's desperation, began to offer her services on credit. The cost of the ceremonies, the protective charms, and the rituals began to accumulate rapidly. What started as small offerings soon ballooned into an astronomical debt. Over the course of a single year, the amount the family allegedly owed Daphne grew to somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. It was a staggering sum, one that the struggling sewing business could never hope to repay. As the debt mounted, the atmosphere within the family changed. The light-hearted laughter that once filled Long and Hong's apartment was replaced by whispered conversations and anxious glances. The elderly couple, who had always lived simply and honestly, felt trapped in a situation they did not fully understand. They had placed their trust in a spiritual guide, only to find themselves drowning in a financial abyss. Daphne's demeanor also shifted. The warm, comforting spiritual advisor began to reveal a cold and demanding nature. She wanted her money, and she was not a person who tolerated delay. She knew that Long and Hong possessed substantial life insurance policies, designed to secure the future of their children and grandchildren in the event of their passing. This knowledge sparked a dark and terrible ambition within her. If the family could not pay their debt in life, she would find a way to collect it through their deaths. Unbeknownst to the gentle elderly couple, a plan was being formed in the dark. Daphne reached out to an acquaintance named Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who was struggling to survive after being laid off from his job. Desperate, hungry, and facing the prospect of homelessness, Bobby was highly vulnerable to temptation. Daphne offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and commit an unspeakable act. To assist him, Bobby enlisted a 16-year-old nephew, Willie Guillory, a young man who felt he had no choice but to follow his uncle's lead. Chapter 3, The Fateful Morning. The morning of June 10th, 2012, began like any other Sunday in Arlington. The air was warm and still, the the sun rising slowly over the quiet apartment complexes. But at 7:29 in the morning, the peace of the day was shattered when emergency dispatchers received a call from Chow Tran. His voice was laced with worry as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his teenage son had gone to the apartment to knock on the door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly anxious when they noticed that one of the windows was slightly open and things inside did not appear right. Too terrified to enter the residence themselves, they waited on the sidewalk, praying that their fears were groundless. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he noticed a large group of family members standing outside. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the palpable anxiety of the crowd immediately signaled to him that this was no routine call. Entering the apartment through the unlocked door, Officer Weller was immediately struck by the state of the home. The living room was in complete disarray, presenting all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned. He called out into the quiet rooms, his voice echoing off the walls, but there was no response. He systematically searched the kitchen, the bathroom, and finally entered the bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Officer Weller felt a momentary sense of relief, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the summer heat. He turned to leave the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the walls. That was when he saw them. Near a small closet, there were faint hand smudges on the wall, as if someone had reached out for support in a moment of struggle. A chill ran down the officer's spine. Every instinct told him that opening that closet door would change everything, yet his duty compelled him forward. With a hesitant hand, he pulled open the closet door. The sight that met him was one of profound tragedy. Long and Hong were inside, their lives cruelly stolen from them. They had been bound with duct tape, their faces covered to prevent them from calling for help. It was a scene of immense violence, one that left even a veteran officer like Weller in a state of shock. He walked out of the bedroom, temporarily unable to speak or use his radio, paralyzed by the sheer weight of what he had witnessed. Once he regained his composure, he called for assistance, summoning a supervisor and the homicide unit. The peaceful Sunday had transformed into a search for answers, a quest to discover who could commit such a heartless act against two gentle elders who had never harmed a soul. Chapter 4, The Pursuit of Truth. The arrival of the Arlington homicide investigators brought a focused, determined energy to the scene. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator with 21 years in the department, took charge of the case. He stood in the apartment, surveying the chaos, his mind analyzing every detail. The physical evidence left behind was highly unusual. On the coffee table, a plate of crushed prescription pills lay undisturbed, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in a prominent position. To the untrained eye, these items pointed directly to local gang activity. Arlington was home to several active gangs known for extortion and robbery, and the blue bandana was a color often associated with their members. However, Detective Stewart remained deeply skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, the clues too conveniently displayed. Most gang robberies were quick and chaotic, rarely involving such a high level of personal, targeted violence. The extensive use of duct tape and the deliberate concealment of the bodies in the closet suggested an intention that went far beyond a simple burglary gone wrong. It felt personal. The investigators began the delicate process of interviewing the grieving family. Chow Tran, as a primary English speaker, became their main point of contact. He described the previous evening, explaining that the family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday. It had been a happy occasion, filled with laughter and love. The elderly couple had stayed until 10:30 in the evening, after which they were driven home by another family member. It was the last time they were seen alive. Chow painted a picture of a sweet, generous couple who had no enemies and lived quiet lives. He mentioned that while Vietnamese immigrants often kept cash at home due to a traditional distrust of banking institutions, his in-laws had very little money. The sewing business had been struggling, and they were facing difficult times. As the detectives continued their work, a phone call from an insurance company changed the trajectory of the investigation. The agent informed Detective Stewart that Long and Hong were covered by life insurance policies, totaling $1 million. When the detective asked who the beneficiaries were, the answer was clear. Chow Tran was among them. This revelation introduced a complex financial motive. On June 13, 2012, the detectives invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview. Chow was cooperative, explaining that the insurance policies were established to ensure the survival of the family, business in the event of a tragedy. He provided a detailed timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the murders, explaining that he and other family members had played cards until after 10 o'clock. His alibi was insistent, and without direct evidence, the police could not name him as a suspect. Meanwhile, the forensic laboratory processed the evidence from the apartment. They gathered deoxyribonucleic acid profiles from the marijuana cigarette and examined the duct tape for fingerprints. When the results returned, the investigators faced a major setback. The deoxyribonucleic acid did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile within a combined DNA index system database. With no immediate matches and no new leads, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The detectives had interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and community members, but the killer remained in the shadows. Months turned into years, and the case of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu slowly went cold. Yet, the memory of the gentle couple remained a quiet flame, keeping the promise of justice alive in the hearts of the detectives. Chapter 5, The Catalyst. For 3 long years, the file containing the details of the Arlington tragedy sat on a shelf, quiet but never forgotten. The year was now 2015, and the world had moved on. But in the grand design of justice, the smallest events can sometimes set the largest wheels in motion. In the city of Houston, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, horse theft is a serious felony. Because Willie had reached the age of adulthood and was now being charged with a felony, the law required his biological profile to be entered into the national database. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old with no prior felony convictions, which was why his profile had never appeared in the system. When his deoxyribonucleic acid was uploaded, the digital systems of the law performed a silent comparison. Within seconds, a match was found. The deoxyribonucleic acid on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette recovered from the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, Arlington detectives traveled to locate Willie. They arrested him for a parole violation to avoid alerting him to the true nature of their interest. In the interrogation room, Willie initially denied any involvement, claiming he had never been anywhere near Arlington. But when Detective Stewart laid out the scientific reality of the biological evidence, the young man's defenses crumbled. He began to weep, the heavy burden of a secret finally breaking his resolve. He confessed to being in the apartment, but he insisted he had not acted alone. He pointed the finger at his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie recounted the events of June 9, 2012. His uncle had approached him, asking for help with a job in Arlington. Having grown up in a difficult environment, Willie felt he had no choice but to accompany his uncle. When they arrived, Bobby used a physical key to enter the apartment, intending to stage a robbery before the couple returned. They scattered belongings left the pills, the beer bottle, and the blue bandana to make it look like the work of local gang members. Willie admitted to smoking the marijuana cigarette, unaware that this small act would eventually lead the police to their door. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation quickly escalated into violence. Bobby attacked the elderly man, while Willie attempted to prevent Hong from escaping. After the struggle ended, they used duct tape to secure the couple and move them into the closet before fleeing back to Houston. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed the name of the person who had orchestrated the entire plot, Daphne Wright. He explained that Daphne was a friend of his uncle's and had claimed that the couple owed her a substantial amount of money. She had told Bobby that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead, promising him $10,000 for the deed. With this explosive confession, the puzzle began to fall into place. The detectives now knew that the tragedy was not a random act of street violence, but a calculated, cold-hearted plan born of greed and manipulation. Chapter 6, Unveiling the Mastermind. The focus of the investigation now turned to Bobby Guillory. On December 16th, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they arrested the 52-year-old man on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, Bobby remained silent, refusing to cooperate. But when faced with a search warrant for his own biological profile and the realization that his nephew had already confessed, his resolve dissolved. He broke down, weeping in the interrogation room, expressing fear and regret for his actions. He had no prior criminal history and had never been in trouble with the law before this tragic event. Bobby confirmed Willie's story, placing the blame entirely on Daphne Wright. He explained that he had been in a state of extreme financial desperation, having lost his job and facing the threat of life on the streets. Daphne had recognized his vulnerability and used it to her advantage, offering him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bobby, Daphne operated as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong Lu had become deeply indebted to her as they tried to save their failing business. When they could no longer pay, Daphne realized she could collect her money through the life insurance policies. Bobby made a startling revelation during his confession. He claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. This accusation of ultimate betrayal shocked the investigators. Chow, whom they had supported and interviewed multiple times, was now implicated as a key participant in the conspiracy. On August 31st, 2016, detectives traveled to Houston to confront Daphne Wright. They found a woman who was the undisputed leader of her household, married with 3 daughters. When questioned about Chow, she confirmed he was a client, but refused to discuss their financial arrangements. Her attitude was cold and dismissive, showing no remorse or willingness to assist the police. Armed with an arrest warrant, the detectives returned to her home, placing her under arrest and conducting a thorough search of the residence. Inside, they discovered detailed ledgers that documented her business transactions. The books revealed that she regularly charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services, removing any doubt about the massive financial scale of her operations. Daphne's husband, Howard, was fully cooperative with the police, maintaining that he had no knowledge of his wife's dark activities. He expressed genuine shock, having believed his wife was simply offering peaceful spiritual guidance to those in need. Daphne, however, refused to speak, demanding the presence of her attorney and maintaining a stoic silence. Chapter 7, The Scales of Justice. The final piece of the complex narrative emerged when prosecutors subpoenaed Chow Tran's financial records in 2015. They discovered that following the tragic deaths of his in-laws, Chow had not reopened the sewing business. Instead, he had purchased a comfortable new home with the proceeds of the life insurance policies. Faced with the mounting evidence against him, Chow refused to speak to the police without his attorney, recognizing that they needed his testimony to secure a conviction against the mastermind. Daphne Wright the prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full cooperation and truthful testimony at trial. It was a compromise often required in the pursuit of justice, a choice to hold the primary instigator accountable. During his deposition, Chow presented a narrative of psychological control. He claimed that he and his mother-in-law had been utterly terrified of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, believing she could place a devastating curse on their family if they did not pay. He even claimed that Hong Lu, in an act of ultimate self-sacrifice, had suggested her own death so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy the debt. Investigators found this claim to be highly unbelievable, viewing it as an attempt to lessen his own guilt. Daphne's trial began on August 26, 2019. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a relentless, greedy woman who manipulated his family and demanded their lives for money. The defense countered by pointing out that there was no physical documentation of the vast debt and suggested that Chow had orchestrated the crime entirely for his own financial gain, pocketing the $850,000 of insurance money. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury listened closely to the accumulation of evidence, including the confessions of Bobby and Willie and the physical ledgers found in Daphne's home. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received the ultimate penalty of life in prison, without the possibility of parole, while Bobby and Willie also faced the consequences of their actions. The resolution of the case left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives. Chow Tran remained free, shielded by his immunity agreement. Yet, as the community looked back on the lives of Long Nguyen and Hong Le, they chose to remember the warmth, the dedication, and the beautiful dreams they had brought from Vietnam. The story of their journey was a reminder of the strength of love, the dangers of blind trust, and the enduring pursuit of truth that eventually brought the shadows into the light. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, usually brings with it a warm, golden promise, the kind of light that stretches across the wide concrete avenues and bathes the suburban neighborhoods in a quiet, domestic peace. In the early years of the new millennium, this corner of Tarrant County had become a sanctuary for families seeking a fresh start, a place where different cultures woven together created a vibrant, colorful tapestry of shared hopes. Among those who had traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean to build a new life were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Le. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, bringing with them not only their 3 children, but also a deep treasury of time-honored traditions, an unwavering work ethic, and a love that had weathered decades of change. Long was a man of quiet dignity, whose face bore the gentle lines of a lifetime of hard work and laughter, while Hong was the warm, beating heart of their household, a woman whose culinary skills and nurturing presence made their home a central gathering place for the local Vietnamese community. Together, they represented the resilient spirit of the post-1975 immigrant generation, those who had left behind the familiar landscapes of their homeland to cultivate a legacy for their children and grandchildren in a land of unfamiliar customs and languages. For more than a decade, they poured their energy into building a commercial sewing business, a venture that began as a modest operation in their garage, but quickly grew into a thriving enterprise. To navigate the complexities of American business transactions, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow was the public face of the business, the one who negotiated contracts, shook hands with suppliers, and acted as the bridge between the traditional world of his in-laws and the fast-paced commercial environment of Texas. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the family reached the pinnacle of their entrepreneurial journey when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, a commercial giant whose name was recognized by children and families across the world. For a time, it seemed that their version of the American dream had been fully realized. Their home was filled with the sounds of their grandchildren playing, the hum of sewing machines, and the comforting aroma of traditional Vietnamese broth simmering on the stove. Yet, as is often the case with the unpredictable tides of commerce, this period of abundance was not to last. By the year 2011, the sewing business suffered a devastating blow when the massive contract was discontinued. Almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle, and the family found themselves facing severe financial distress. The machines that had once hummed with productive energy fell silent, and a heavy cloud of anxiety settled over the household. Long and Hong, deeply rooted in the traditional spiritual practices of their ancestors, believed that the sudden string of misfortune was not merely a consequence of shifting market dynamics, but rather the result of a spiritual imbalance, a curse that had settled upon their endeavors. In many East Asian traditions, when a family encounters a series of insurmountable obstacles, such as impending bankruptcy, severe health crises, or marital discord, it is common to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors are believed to possess the unique ability to communicate with the spiritual realm, perform cleansing rituals, and invite the protective blessings of the lucky deities and the gods of wealth, desperate to find a solution and restore harmony to their family. Hong and Chow began searching through the local Vietnamese language newspapers, hoping to find someone who could help them lift the perceived curse. Their search led them to an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles to the south. The woman, who went by the name of Daphne Wright, advertised a wide range of metaphysical services, claiming she could remove malevolent curses, bestow powerful blessings of good fortune, and help struggling businesses regain their prosperity. For a family standing on the precipice of financial ruin, Daphne's promises shone like a beacon of hope. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow made the drive to Houston to consult with the spiritual practitioner, embarking on a path that would ultimately lead the family into a dark web of manipulation and greed. At first, the rituals seemed to offer a sense of comfort. Daphne performed ceremonies intended to cleanse a family's business of negative energy, and for a brief period, Long and Hong felt a renewed sense of optimism. They believed that their spiritual savior would guide them back to the prosperous path they had worked so hard to establish. However, as the months passed, the promised financial recovery failed to materialize. Instead of advising the family to adjust their business strategies, Daphne maintained that the curse was exceptionally stubborn, requiring increasingly elaborate and expensive rituals to dismantle. Deeply ensnared by their beliefs and terrified of the spiritual consequences of stopping the ceremonies, the family continued to pour their remaining resources into Daphne's services. Because they did not have the cash readily available, Daphne began extending them credit, allowing the debt to accumulate. Over the course of a year, the financial obligation ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. What had begun as a quest for spiritual healing had transformed into a crushing financial prison, with Daphne acting as a spiritual loan shark who demanded absolute compliance and prompt payment. The tension reached a devastating climax on the morning of June 10th, 2012. At 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a frantic call from Chow Tran. He explained that he and his family had been trying to contact his elderly in-laws, 70-something Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, but had received no response. Worried by the silence, Chow had sent his teenage son to knock on the apartment door, but the knock went unanswered. The family gathered outside the residence, their concern deepening when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was unusually open. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, but too frightened to enter the home themselves, they waited anxiously on the sidewalk for police to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington police force, was the first to respond to the welfare check. As she pulled up to the apartment complex, she immediately sensed that this was not a routine call. It was exceptionally early in the morning for a welfare check, and the sight of an entire multi-generational family standing outside in a state of visible distress suggested a situation of gravity. Officer Weller entered the apartment, calling out the names of the elderly couple, but her voice echoed through quiet rooms without response. The interior of the home was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers had been pulled open, personal belongings were scattered across the floor, and a collection of compact discs had been ransacked. As Officer Weller searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, she found no sign of the occupants. She proceeded to the master bedroom, shining her flashlight into the darkened corners. Initially, she saw nothing out of the ordinary that would suggest the couple was still inside, and she began to hope that perhaps they had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool air before the Texas heat set in. However, as she turned to leave the bedroom, her flashlight caught a series of faint hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a remarkably small closet. A sudden, instinctual hesitation washed over her, an internal voice warning her the tragedy that lay beyond the thin wooden door. Recognizing her duty to leave no stone unturned, she reached out and pulled the closet door open. Inside the cramped space lay the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. They had been bound hand and foot, hogtied with heavy silver duct tape. Their heads and mouths were completely enveloped in layers of the thick adhesive, and the small closet was stained with the unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. Officer Weller, despite her 14 years of experience on the force, was struck with a profound sense of shock. The sheer brutality of the scene left her momentarily unable to speak or even use her radio to call. For assistance, she stepped back into the living room, gathering her composure in the quiet space, before finally contacting her supervisor and requesting the dispatch of the crime scene unit and the homicide investigators. When Detective Stewart and the veteran homicide team arrived, they were met with a crime scene that was both heartbreaking and perplexing. The physical evidence suggested that the elderly couple had been confronted the moment they stepped through their front door. There were traces of blood on the entryway carpet, on the couch, on the coffee table, and along the walls leading toward the back bedroom, indicating that they had desperately tried to cling to the walls as they were being forced into the rear of the apartment. On the coffee table, investigators found a plate containing crushed prescription pills, prepared in a manner that suggested recreational consumption, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle, left in a prominent position as if it were a deliberate calling card. To the initial observer, these items strongly pointed to the involvement of local street gangs, some of whom were known to operate in the region and occasionally extort local business owners. Yet, as the seasoned investigators began to analyze the scene, a sense of skepticism began to take root. The presentation of the gang markers seemed almost too perfect, too stage-managed to be the work of impulsive street criminals. While street gangs certainly engage in robberies, the extreme level of personalized violence inflicted upon an elderly couple who had no known enemies or illicit association seemed inconsistent with a simple robbery gone wrong. The detectives began to hypothesize that the crime scene had been deliberately staged to mislead the police and divert attention away from the true perpetrators. The following day, detectives attended the autopsies of the victims at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that both Long and Hong had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted with an instrument resembling a hammer or a small bat. However, the physical trauma was not the primary cause of their deaths. The autopsy revealed a far more agonizing reality. Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, and Long's face had been bound with 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The revelation of this slow, painful end deepened the determination of the detectives to bring those responsible to justice. As the team returned to the police station to coordinate their next steps, Detective Stewart received an unexpected telephone call from a life insurance company. The representative informed the detective that the deceased couple was covered under a highly substantial life insurance policy valued at approximately $1 million. When Detective Stewart inquired about the designated beneficiaries of this policy, the answer sent the investigation in an entirely new direction. One of the primary beneficiaries was their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Hoping to clarify this financial development, investigators invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview on June 13th, 2012. Chow cooperated fully, presenting himself as a grieving relative eager to assist the police. When questioned about the insurance policy, he explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the family had established a policy to ensure the business could continue to support the extended family in the event of tragedy. He also provided a detailed, consistent timeline of his activities on the night of the murders, explaining that the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday, playing cards and sharing a meal until past 10 o'clock in the evening. Chow's alibi was supported by other family members, and the detectives found no immediate physical evidence to connect him to the physical acts of violence. To ensure a thorough investigation, the crime scene technicians processed the biological evidence collected from the apartment, including the forensic profiles from the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. The resulting deoxyribonucleic acid profile was submitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Combined DNA Index System, but the search yielded no matches. Because the database primarily contains profiles of individuals with prior felony convictions, the lack of a match suggested that the person who left the cigarette might have been a minor or someone who had never been arrested for a serious offense. With no viable leads, no matching fingerprints, and an entire family possessing consistent alibis, the investigation slowly ground to a halt. For more than 2 years, the file sat on detectives' desks, a somber reminder of an unsolved tragedy. The breakthrough came unexpectedly in October the year 2015, more than 3 years after the fateful night in Arlington. The police department received notification that a newly entered deoxyribonucleic acid profile in the national database had produced a perfect match to the biological material recovered from the marijuana cigarette. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been present in the database during the initial investigation. Now an adult with a felony record, his identity was finally revealed to the law enforcement community. On October 17, 2015, investigators located Willie Guillory and brought him in for questioning. Initially, Willie denied any knowledge of the events in Arlington, claiming he had never visited the city and suggesting that perhaps his biological material had been somehow transferred without his knowledge. However, when the detectives presented him with the undeniable scientific accuracy of the deoxyribonucleic acid match, the young man's defenses crumbled. He broke down in tears and confessed to his role in the crime, insisting that he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he had been living under the care of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had instructed him to join him on a trip to Arlington to assist with a task, promising that they would be compensated for their help. On June 9, 2012, the uncle and nephew made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington. Willie claimed that Bobby had been provided with a key to the elderly couple's apartment, allowing them to enter the residence without forcing the lock. Once inside, Bobby instructed Willie to scatter items around the living room, open drawers, and leave the gang-related items, including the blue bandana, the crushed pills, and the beer bottle, to create the illusion of a street gang robbery. During this process, Willie had smoked a portion of a marijuana cigarette. inadvertently leaving behind the crucial piece of evidence that would eventually identify him. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation turned violent. Bobby confronted the couple, using a blunt object to incapacitate them, while Willie assisted in preventing their escape. Together, they bound the victims with duct tape, moved them into the small bedroom closet, and returned to Houston. When asked why they had targeted an elderly couple they did not even know, Willie revealed that the entire operation had been organized and funded by a prominent acquaintance of his uncle, a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. Willie stated that he had witnessed his uncle meeting with Daphne in her office, where she complained about clients who owed her a substantial amount of money, and declared that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this critical confession, the investigators secured arrest warrants for Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they apprehended Bobby on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of his arrest and the confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate, confirming that Daphne Wright had orchestrated the entire plot. He explained that in 2011, he had been struggling with severe financial difficulties after being laid off from his job. Daphne, aware of his desperation, had offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and carry out the deed. Bobby painted a portrait of Daphne as an incredibly calculating individual who operated her spiritual practice with the ruthless efficiency of an organized enterprise. According to Bobby, Chow Tran and Hong Lee had accumulated a massive debt to Daphne for her services, and when they were unable to pay, Daphne proposed a solution centered on the couple's life insurance policies. She suggested that by removing the elderly couple, Chow and his wife would receive a significant financial windfall, which would then be used to settle the outstanding spiritual debt. Most shockingly, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. In August of the year 2016, detectives executed a search warrant at Daphne Wright's Houston residence and placed her under arrest inside her home. Investigators discovered detailed ledger books documenting her extensive business transactions. The records revealed that she had been charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for various spiritual services, confirming the immense financial scale of her operations. While Daphne maintained her innocence and refused to provide statements without her attorney, the combined testimonies of Willie and Bobby Guillory, along with the financial ledgers and the scientific evidence, provided a powerful foundation for the prosecution. To secure a conviction against the primary organizer of the crime, prosecutors made the difficult decision to offer Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his complete and honest testimony. Chow agreed to the arrangement, and during Daphne's trial in August of the year 2019, he took the stand to describe the immense psychological control she had exerted over his family. He portrayed her as an imposing, greedy figure who used their deeply held traditional beliefs to manipulate them, ultimately demanding their compliance under the threat of spiritual and physical ruin. The defense team vigorously challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he had used a spiritual advisor as a scapegoat to secure the life insurance proceeds for himself without facing legal consequences. However, after hearing all the evidence, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a definitive end to her manipulative reign. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, ensuring that those who had participated in the tragedy were held accountable. While the legal proceedings left some questions unanswered and brought a mixture of emotions to the surviving family members, the resolution of the case stands as a testament to the dedication of the investigators who refused to let the memory of Long, Nguyen, and Hong Lee fade into obscurity. The story of their journey, their devotion to their family, and the ultimate triumph of justice serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring importance of community, truth, and the protective embrace of the law. The sun always seemed to rise with gentle, golden promise over flat, Sprawling landscapes of north-central Texas, in the city of Arlington, a place where the hum of modern industry met the quiet warmth of tight-knit neighborhoods. The mornings were usually filled with the comforting sounds of early traffic, the chirping of birds in the oak trees, and the smell of fresh coffee brewing in suburban kitchens. It was a city of diverse faces, a tapestry of cultures woven together by families who had traveled from all corners of the world to find their own piece of the American dream. Among these families were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, leaving behind the familiar, bustling streets of their homeland in Vietnam. For decades, they had known the rhythm of a different life, one shaped by ancient traditions, close community ties, and the quiet resilience that comes from surviving times of great change. When they made the decision to pack up their lives and move to Texas with their 3 children, they were not looking for grand fortunes. Instead, they sought a peaceful sanctuary where their children and grandchildren could grow, learn, and thrive under the wide, open skies of a new land. In Arlington, they found a thriving Vietnamese community, a place where the old ways and the new world lived in a beautiful, harmonious balance. The first major wave of immigrants had arrived in the area after the year 1975, and over the decades, they had built a vibrant network of businesses, temples, and neighborhoods. Long and Hong studied the area carefully. They saw a place of opportunity, a welcoming city where hard work was rewarded and where they could establish a legacy. With determination and a shared work ethic, the elderly couple started a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, run out of a small workspace filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines, the colorful mounds of fabrics, and the soft chatter of family members working side by side. To help manage the business, they enlisted the support of their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was young, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family, making him the natural public face of the enterprise. He handled the contracts, spoke with the suppliers, and navigated the complex world of American business regulations, while Long and Hong focused on the craft they knew best, ensuring every garment was stitched with perfection. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit. The business expanded, and their reputation for quality craftsmanship grew. The pinnacle of their success came when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, producing clothing that would bear the iconic designs of Disney. It was a proud moment for the family, a validation of all the sacrifices they had made when crossing the ocean. They were living the dream they had envisioned, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the respect of their peers. But life, like the Texas weather, can be unpredictable. By the year 2011, the economic tides began to turn. The coveted contract with the entertainment giant was lost, and almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle. The sewing machines grew quiet, and the heavy silence of financial anxieties settled over the family. The bills began to accumulate, and the pressure of maintaining the business started to take a heavy toll on everyone, especially on Hong and her son-in-law, Chow. In moments of deep distress, people often look to their roots for guidance and comfort. For generations, their ancestors have believed in the spiritual forces that govern luck, prosperity, and protection. In the traditional culture of their homeland, when a household faced a sudden string of bad luck or impending ruin, it was common to believe that a spiritual imbalance or even a curse was at play. To remedy this, families would seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor, a person believed to possess the rare ability to communicate with the unseen world, perform ancient rituals, and lift a heavy hand of misfortune. Anxious to save the family business and find a way out of the darkening financial shadow, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law began searching to the local Vietnamese newspapers, looking for someone who could offer a spiritual solution. It was there, among the advertisements of local merchants and community services, that they found a notice for a spiritual advisor located in Houston. Some 250 miles away, the woman advertised herself as a powerful healer, someone who could remove the most stubborn of bad curses, bestow good fortune, and restore peace to troubled households. With a heart full of hope, Chow reached out to the advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. She agreed to meet him at her home in Houston for a consultation. The family believed that this meeting would be the turning point, the moment their luck would finally change and the sewing machines would hum with busy productivity. Once again, Daphne performed her rituals, burning incense and reciting prayers designed to ward off the negative energies that had plagued the business. For a brief period, Chow and Hong felt a sense of relief, confident that their spiritual savior would guide them back to prosperity. Yet, behind the facade of spiritual healing, a much darker reality was beginning to unfold. The rituals were not free, and Daphne Wright was not a simple, benevolent healer. As the months passed and the business failed to recover, Daphne began to charge exorbitant fees for her services. She ran her operations on a system of spiritual credit, convincing the desperate family that more complex, intensive rituals were required to fully break the curse. The debt grew rapidly, ballooning to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. The family was trapped in a cycle of desperation, pouring what little money they had left into the rituals. Terrified of what might happen if they stopped, Daphne was a master of psychological control, making it clear that those who failed to pay her would face dire spiritual consequences. The pressure was building to a breaking point, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock the entire city of Arlington. On the morning of the 10th of June, the year 2012, the quiet of the early hours was broken when emergency dispatchers received a call at 7:29. The caller was Chow Tran, his voice trembling with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. He explained that his teenage son had gone to knock on their apartment door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly worried when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was open and things inside did not look right. When the responding police officers arrived at the apartment complex, they found the family waiting outside, too terrified to enter the home themselves. Officer Weller, a veteran officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to step through the front door. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray, bearing all the hallmarks of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, belongings were scattered across the floor, and a heavy, unsettling silence hung in the air. Officer Weller moved cautiously through the rooms, calling out for Long and Hong, but there was no response. After checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, he entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty. He turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall, he noticed dark hand smudges next to a small closet door. A sense of apprehension washed over him, a deep instinct telling him that something terrible lay behind that door. Taking a deep breath, Officer Weller opened the closet. Inside, he made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were inside the small space, their bodies bound tightly with duct tape. Their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped, and there was no sign of life. In that silent, tragic moment, the officer knew that their journey to find the American dream had ended in an unspeakable nightmare. The news of the double homicide sent shockwaves through the Arlington Police Department. Homicide investigators, including seasoned detectives with over 2 decades of experience, arrived to process the scene. It was a highly violent and chaotic environment. The physical evidence suggested that an attack had occurred the moment the elderly couple had walked through their front door, with signs of a struggle near the entrance on the carpet and against the furniture. As the forensic teams began their meticulous work, they uncovered several items that seemed designed to paint a specific picture. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle left in plain. sight. To the investigators, this bandana looked almost like a calling card, pointing directly toward the active street gangs known to operate in the region. However, the detectives remained skeptical. In their years of investigating major crimes, they had learned that when a crime scene appears too perfect, too staged, it often means the perpetrator is trying to direct attention away from the truth. The level of violence and the specific nature of the crime felt deeply personal, far exceeding the typical patterns of a standard robbery. They collected every piece of potential evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and swabs of the duct tape, hoping that science would eventually provide the answers. In the days following the tragedy, the detectives focused on interviewing the family members to understand who might have wanted to harm the gentle, hard-working couple. Chow Tran served as the primary spokesperson, cooperating fully and providing an airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family. He explained that on the night of the incident, they had all been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering,